Welcome to the Go Procast, where we invite business doers who are changing lives by sharing their stories, their strategies and tactics, and who bravely talk about their failures that actually led to their biggest successes. Now it's time to Go Pro with Jeremy Torres. Speaker, teacher, writer, and researcher, my next guest, Liam Naden, helps you understand the process for creating true success in your life by understanding how to use your brain the right way, overcoming your problems, and achieving your goals by ending frustrations. He is the host of the podcast Use Your Brain for Success, author of Rebalancing Your Brain for Success, and creator of Neuroscience Rebalancing, called NSR, which is a process that automatically gets your brain working the right way to bring you life the way you want. Liam is also an experienced marriage and relationships coach, host of the Growing in Love for Life podcast, author of 20 books, and creator of 4 relationships coaching programs. Please welcome to the Go Procast, Liam Naden. How are you doing, my friend?
Hi, Jeremy. I'm great. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
My pleasure. And something we left out of the introduction is captain of the open seas with your nomadic lifestyle on a yacht cruising the world. That's pretty exciting. Yeah. That's the way a lot of people wish they were living these days, I bet.
Yeah, well, I figured out if you learn how to use your brain the right way, it's amazing what shows up.
Isn't that great? So, there's different levels of isolation. So you are way ahead of the game from the rest of us on that one, right? So you're quite at home being by yourselves and isolated from the world during this last 18 months, right?
Yeah, I haven't noticed anything different.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So what is, I guess first thing I do is start off my show the same way every single time, as an homage to a friend of mine, Steve Needleberg, by asking you to tell us something good.
Something good.
Yeah.
Life can be the way you want it to be. And probably something more important I could say is you're not designed to have problems in your life. Problems are a sign you're doing something wrong.
Right. And that's mostly generated between the 6 inches of real estate right here?
That's absolutely right. Yep. The brain. Yeah.
The brain. So yes, we're very big into the normal way to make oneself successful in our own construct in our world is by self-improvement, reading, especially being from New Zealand or in New Zealand with very little access to the real people, and probably not YouTube back then. So reading the people, Tony Robbins and cassette tapes, and same thing we all did, and thought if we just did what they did, these successful people, and thought we could do it and believed we could do it, if you could conceive it, we could achieve it. You went through all that for many years, correct? You bought into it.
Absolutely right. And what I found was I was the ultimate student of success, really. So I've had my own businesses pretty well most of my adult life. I actually started out as a studying music at university, and studied Renaissance music and the organ. But I fell in love with wine, and at my early 20s, and I found myself with my own wine business. And I went on and I had lots of different businesses throughout my life, the following decades. But more than just having my own businesses, I really wanted to be a success.
Yeah.
I wanted to be hugely successful. And I'm sure most of your listeners are probably feeling the same way. And so I really put in an effort. I studied everything I could lay my hands on to figure out how can I be successful, which of course included making a lot of money and having freedom to travel and all those things. So I became the ultimate student. And, yes, I was in New Zealand, but I traveled to seminars in the US, to Canada, to Europe.
So you had to put in 10 times the effort that rest of us who live in these places where we're populated with these, or visit easier, right? You got to get on a plane and travel across continents. So
but
you
that was
wanted
okay.
it. Yeah. Well,
for
yeah.
sure. And I went
Yeah.
I went to seminars, I read the books, and I did the stuff. I didn't just read a book and go, well, that was interesting, or go to a seminar and say, or even things like subliminal tapes. They were
Mm.
tapes back then,
Yeah.
and listening to hypnosis and NLP and changing your beliefs and changing your subconscious mind and all those things. I really did that. I remember there was one tape I listened to every day for about 3 years,
Mm.
solid, without
Mm.
missing. But the funny thing happened when I got to my mid-40s, and so I knew all this stuff, and I'd studied spirituality,
Now, I want to ask you something
meditation.
before you get to the 40, because I know where you're going. I listen to a lot of your
Okay.
podcasts, but I want to
All
stop
right.
for half a second. You did see incremental improvement in your success, your definition of success throughout that time, right? So there were clues
Oh, for sure.
that things were working, but it wasn't long-term, permanent
No,
cruise
because
control stuff.
that's right, because it's like I still had problems, and it felt like I was on a roller coaster of, yes, I achieved the next level of success, and then I'd have a problem to deal with. And instead of being able to celebrate my success all the time, it was like, yes, but there are more problems on the way, and and I'm sure many of your listeners can relate to this. It's, why have I got all these problems with people, with business issues, with unexpected things that show up that are just a nuisance to have to deal with,
Yeah.
and business ventures that didn't go the way I thought they would. And it became really frustrating that, of course, that kept driving me to find yet another solution to get on top of it, because that's what we do, isn't it? We think, well, I've got
Yes.
a problem here. How do I fix the problem? I'll go and try and get some more information on how to fix this problem. And
So
very often
you're
we get on
constantly
this.
fixing you're fixing the symptoms and never paying attention to the base or the nucleus of what's causing these constant flare-ups.
Yep, that's right. Which is very tiring.
Yeah, and I think
say
you're
the
right
least.
when you say we all do that. I believe that's very true. We all live like we accept it. We said this is how it is, but you're saying it's not.
No, we've come to accept that stress is, part of the process and part of the price you pay for success. Which is really strange when you think about it, because what we're all trying to achieve, what we think success really is not having stress in our life. That's the ultimate goal.
Right.
That's why we want the bigger car and the bigger house and the more money, is not to have stress and problems in our life. But it's like, the more you get and the more you achieve, you still have all these issues, and then you come to accept and say, oh well, it's just the sacrifices I have to make for success.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a badge of honor.
Yeah.
If you only knew what I'd have to go through to be this successful, you wouldn't even want it. But it doesn't have to be that way. And so you came through a period of ups and downs, and then the worst. Then we get to, you're in your 40s.
The best.
Yeah, the abyss. Let's go there. What was it that is it a final straw, a collection of over the years, or was it something out of left field?
It was semi out of left field, but it was really tied up with, at the time, my second marriage wasn't very good, and essentially when I made the decision to end that marriage, I also, through an acrimonious divorce, lost absolutely everything. So I became homeless, and we've all been cleaned out by the exes at some point. I guess a lot of people have.
A lot of people have. Willie Nelson says why divorce is so expensive is because it's worth it. But I don't know if the price you paid was extreme. You were homeless again, or for the first time.
I literally was, and the only place I could go was back to my elderly mother and sleep on the sofa in the living room in her small flat. I had no friends anymore because I'd moved away from that town. Yeah, well, I hadn't been in that town for many years. I had no prospects. That was the worst thing. It was like I had no clue on what I was going to do. I'd lost everything, and apart from fighting off the bankruptcy people, I had no clue on what to do with my life. And that's a really strange place to get to when you can't see any option. So even if you sat down and wrote goals and said, well, this is what I'm going to do, I wasn't in that place because I absolutely had no idea what I was going to do.
So I know I listened to a quote of yours, which I like. I wrote it down. I want to read it. It says, you can't think positive when you don't feel good. You can only think positive when you feel good. So people, you've been thinking their whole life, if I just think positive things are going to happen when things are going bad. I think it positive, think it through positively, but you're in a place where you don't feel good mentally, physically, security, humility, you know, and so to think positive, well, that lasts about till your sandwich is gone, right? And then despair.
That's right.
So writing your goals is futile at that point.
Absolutely. And in fact, everything that I'd ever studied, I thought, well, you know, this shouldn't happen to me. I know how to be successful. I've done all the techniques.
Yeah.
And so why haven't they worked? Why aren't they working for me now? Why can I not get out of this situation?
Yeah. Even if you were to accept it as everything's happening for a reason, you know, which a lot of people do, myself included, Marcus Aurelius and, you know, all that philosophy of the bad things are there to teach us, or they're there for whatever reason, the yin and the yang and all that. Still, you got to pay and play and have fun and get yourself back in the right state of mind. When does it turn? How does it start to turn?
Well, I think the path for me, and the path that I've gone on to really nut out into a system, if you like, of finding success. The part for me was getting to the point where you actually, and I could explain a little bit as to how this works, or how I discovered that it works on an actual mechanical, physical, it has a basis in physical reality. It's not just an idea that comes from the ether, you know.
You're right.
But when you get to a place almost of despair, but when you decide that you're just going to give up, you're going to let go, and you say to yourself, look, you admit to yourself you don't know what to do, and you just say, look, I give up, and I accept that I don't know what I want, that I don't know what to do, that I don't know how to get out of my situation, and I'm just going to give up and see what happens. And that's a really interesting place to get to. And you have to, in some ways, what I teach people is you don't have to go as far to the bottom as I did to shift your brain basically to that place. But it becomes, I don't know if you want me to explain how it works on a physical level.
Well, yeah, because I actually
what
have,
I discovered was
to show why you're talking about that. If you go where I think you're going with it, you know, I like what you talk about. So I'm very interested in it for sure. I'd like to hear a little bit about that, but yeah.
Sure.
So
well,
going to that next level, that's the thing. When you get there and you go, now you've surrendered, which is basically setting down your ego.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know everything. And not only don't I know everything, I probably don't know anything, because all this stuff that I thought I knew isn't even real.
Yeah, I mean, basically it's accepting that there's a part of you that you don't know the answer to, but maybe there's another part of you that does know the answer, but it's beyond your thoughts.
Okay.
Because when you think about what you know, the things that you know are all based on your experience and what you've read and learnt. But if you can't figure it out, maybe there's some other information somewhere that does know the answer that you have access to that's not in your experience. But what happened to me when I did this, exactly.
Yeah.
Because the really interesting thing, and it took me a few years to figure this out afterwards, what had happened, because after I did this letting go and I thought I give up, things actually started to get a lot better, and relatively quickly as well. And within a year or two, sure, I had to unravel all the mess that I'd created, or was a part of, but things got a lot better than they'd ever been in my life before. I'd spent all these years till my mid-40s trying to figure it out, trying to struggle, deal with problems. And when I let go, what I found was different sorts of people started to show up in my life, much better people. Different sorts of opportunities for business started to show up in my life. The opportunity to do different things.
Yes.
Money came to me in a way that gave me everything I needed to do what I truly wanted to do. And I thought, a couple of years into this, when all of these really strange, off the wall things were happening, I met a woman who was completely unlike any woman I'd ever met before. She didn't have any hang-ups and wasn't into problems.
Hold on,
it was a really easy.
There you go. That's a life one. That's a big one. It was just waiting
for sure,
to,
and that's what
to,
we're all
to
looking
show you
for.
where you're ready for this. This universe does that to us.
Yeah.
But it's funny how you
Absolutely.
are connected. We are electric, right? Your brain is electric. And when you start accessing those other parts, the deeper parts, and it's like a muscle too. When you realize how to flex it and get and access that, the universe connects with that. I think. So where did you start getting some of these ahas and figuring out? I mean, how do you put that into words, even if you hadn't experienced it or ever learned it before?
Yeah, well, I also got another clue from the people I was coaching, through the marriage and relationship people I was coaching, because what I found was whether someone usually people come to me and I have coaching programs, and they're desperate to say, basically they're people who want to save their marriage, usually when their husband or their wife wants to end it. So it's a very big problem. If you don't want your marriage to end, but your husband or wife has told you, you've got a problem. So people would come to me, and the interesting thing was I'd give everybody the same information. I'd worked out a system that's very effective on helping people to heal their marriage, no matter where it is. But what I found was some people managed to do the work and save their marriage, and other people didn't. And it didn't seem to depend on how motivated people were, because some people were very motivated, and they're all very motivated. It didn't seem to matter whether people were into praying or not, into prayer. Some people prayed a lot and they still didn't save their marriage. It didn't seem to matter how much information people had. Some people had done a ton of study on marriage before they came to me, and they worked the programs really hard. So that gave me a clue. There had to be something else operating that actually really is what gives you the results you get in your life, other than what we think it is. So I took it back to basics, and I said, all right, let me start at the beginning. Who are we? What is a human being? And I didn't start at the top level of our spiritual side or anything like that. I thought, let's look at us from a purely biological point of view. We're a race of beings that exist in a physical world. So we must have some physical function and way of operating. And of course we do. And if you ask a biologist, what is the purpose of you being here? Because it's a question we all ask. Why am I here?
Yeah.
A biologist will tell you that every form of life, including human life, really there's only one purpose for human life, and that is to survive and thrive so that you can carry on the survival of the species.
Right.
Now, what that means, if you really think about it, is that means you being at your best. Your best chance of survival and thriving is when you are at your best.
Yes.
And we're all striving to be our best. But what does being our best mean?
Right.
It means when you're your most creative, when you're your most productive, when you're your strongest, healthiest, all of these things, mentally, physically, spiritually, you're thriving. And biology has a word for this called homeostasis, when everything's working perfectly in an organism. And we have a word for it. We call it being in the flow, in the zone.
Yeah.
We've all been in that state. So that's actually, on a biological level, the way we're supposed to be is in the flow and in the zone all the time. We're being our best, doing our best. Now, the funny thing about when you have a problem, when you feel stressed, worried, anxious, you're not being your best, and it's damaging you physically.
And
so
I think
it
it's
can't
easy to
have a
make
biological
it a habit.
purpose.
I think it's easy to fall into a
It's all
habit
habit
of being anxious and worried and doubtful.
Yeah.
And it becomes
there's a role
the normal.
There is a role for fear and worry in our life, and it's a very specific physical, biological reflex action to immediate danger. You're designed to feel fear and worry when you're confronted with an immediate threat. And then you kick into a state which is actually called we activate something called the sympathetic nervous system, and you jump out of the way of the train, or you hit back at the animal that's attacking you, and then you go back to your normal happy state. But we've all unfortunately become brainwashed to use our brain the wrong way, where we're making our brain think that there's danger all around us all the time, and that's why we feel stressed and worried.
Yes. And Mark Twain
said, problem,
I think it was Mark Twain or Albert Einstein said, most of the things I've ever worried about never happened. You know?
Oh, exactly. So why do we do it?
Right. Why?
Yeah.
Tell us why.
Just how how the brain works is you have this reflex action in your survival brain, and it's a part of your brain that's at the back of your head. You know, we call it the reptilian brain or the mechanical brain, and this controls all of our automatic functions. Yeah, you've got it there, the mechanical brain. So this is responsible for our automatic functions, the things we never think about, like our breathing and our digestion, and it also is responsible for dealing with an immediate threat. And when our brain sees an immediate threat, what it interprets as an immediate threat, it activates this thing called the sympathetic nervous system when we feel stressed. But the really interesting thing about the sympathetic nervous system, what happens when you feel stressed, when you feel afraid and worried, is your brain shuts down your awareness of everything except negativity. It's designed to do that. Because if you're confronted, if your brain says there's a noise in the forest that's dangerous, it's designed to get you focused totally on what is the problem, where is it, what is it, what are other problems. So you don't notice the beautiful flowers or the whistling tree, the breeze through the trees, but you can see how this relates to normal life, in that if you feel stressed and worried, if all your awareness is shut down, you're not going to be able to deal with any problem. You're not going to be able to see the big picture. You're only going to be able to react and do things that probably are only going to make things worse. And so because you can't see the big picture.
So when you start learning how to shift it from being worried about just one thing and start broadening that horizon again and start noticing things over time, because you allow yourself to, by believing that I don't know everything. And does it start shifting back into the other three zones, the rational, emotional, and creative? And where do we want to eventually live to get be at our most optimal?
The other three things, Okay, well, that comes from understanding what as you said, and as you show on the screen, there are 4 parts to your brain. So the way these work, very briefly, I have a coaching program to go into detail about this, but the way you operate is that your senses bring in information, and they go into your rational brain, all the information. So what you see, smell, taste, touch, they go into your rational brain and are stored as information. But before that, what happens, and based on that, the next part of your brain, which is called the emotional part of your brain, that creates the emotion. What that does, in a very simplistic way to explain it, if all of the time your emotional brain, which is a small place in the middle of your brain, it is basically looking around your environment the whole time, looking out to see if there are any problems. It's evaluating your environment based on your information. So what it says is, right, everything's safe and great at the moment. It produces happy hormones, and you get on with life and you live in the flow. But if it says danger, there's something, a problem, a danger here, it kicks in it produces hormones that make you feel fear and stress. And this is when you go into this lack of awareness state that you cannot, Einstein also said the same brain that created a problem is not the same brain that you use to solve the problem. And that's what he was referring to without realizing. If you're operating in this fear state, that's using the part of your brain that will never solve your problems. It can only ever get you out of a split-second immediate danger. It doesn't have the awareness and the information. So to get to the 4th part of your brain, which I call the creative part of your brain, which again is located, there is a physical place where this is located in your brain. That's the part that you activate when you don't feel fear, when you don't feel anxiety, when you feel gratitude, when you feel love. you can just feel that there's something beyond words that you feel. And that's the state where you get insights,
Yes.
awareness. You come up with new ways of doing things. You have gut feelings about people and about situations, and you come up with these creative ideas. And all, many successful businessmen, artists, musicians, creators throughout history have said there's this place they go to where all their inspiration comes from. This is a physical state that you can generate in your brain. And when you're in that state, you can see the solution to your problems. You can see if you even have any problems. You have a different awareness. And you not only get better ideas, more creative ideas, and gut feelings about what you should and shouldn't do, but this is a weird thing to realize. This part of your brain also creates circumstances for you. It brings to you people, situations, what we call coincidences, chance events.
Yes.
Because when you think about it, everything that shapes our life is usually unexpected. It's not the result of a goals list. The person we meet, who we marry, we didn't expect to meet them the day before. We didn't write down a description and say, I'm going to meet this person tomorrow, or this business opportunity is going to come along. But it's not just chance, because the brain that we have, you could talk forever about how powerful your brain is, but it's unbelievably powerful. And we're limiting ourselves thinking it's just our thoughts and our ideas, but that's not the machinery of our brain. And that's not going to create this perfect, stress-free, problem-free life that we're supposed to have if we're using our brain the wrong way.
So how do we get in touch with you, or is it the website to learn more about this? Is there is it the podcast? I know that you have the podcast, which I was listening to. You have two of them. You have the one on the relationship, growing in love for life, and using your brain for success podcast. And they're pretty quick, 25 minutes or so is the ones I listen to. You get to some pretty specific stuff pretty quickly, but because of that, we've got to continue listening to learn how, it builds. It's not like one show is going to tell us everything, because that's just too much information. But so I like your message. And so is besides the podcast, where do we go to really contact you to figure out more about Neuro-State Rebalancing, or NSR?
Sure. Well, just my website, everything is there, liamnaden.com.
Okay.
To find everything they need to know.
Yep. Up here, all the different, there's coaching. So there's tabs for coaching, and there's the podcast, the Save Your Marriage information, which, it's probably higher than 50% divorce rate, right? Probably 60% these days, especially after COVID and being everybody isolated for the first time. I know my family had a meeting about a month and a half into COVID and said, we don't work for you. Stop telling us what to do. And I had to go. That's how I wrote my book. I had to go find a corner somewhere and find something else to do. But this is fascinating stuff, and I wish we had more time to really get into it. But is there anything that we didn't get to in our short time, because it is so fascinating, and I'm very open to getting to that point, because we all strive to get in that flow state, and it's so easily bumped out. How do we build that muscle to stay in longer?
I think the key is to expand your awareness about who you are and how you operate. And then you start to realize that, maybe we're not nothing else in nature has a problem. There are no problems in nature.
Yes.
There's birth, death, all that.
Yeah.
But if you really go out, here's a good exercise. Go and sit somewhere and watch a bird. Sit and look at a bird. I do this because I'm on the boat all the time. I'm around nature all the time, but they don't have any problems. Nothing in nature has a problem. It's only us humans who have problems. And why don't birds and the rest of nature have problems? Because they just naturally use their mechanical system the right way.
Right.
They're not worrying about, things. They just do what they do.
To their purpose,
we have
their
that
function.
same ability.
Yep.
Exactly.
We have the gift.
And we have the same purpose as well.
Yeah, but much higher, elevated. Yeah. And we're welcome. We're gifted because we have the gift of awareness of the rich satisfaction and rewards of being in that state, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
www.liamnaden, LiamNaden.com for the listeners, LiamNaden.com. I appreciate you being on here. I have another show called The Risk Factor starting in a month or so. Mental health issues. This stuff would be perfect for that show. And maybe we could do a long form one and I can cut it into pieces because I'd really like to dig in a little deeper with this in the future.
Sounds great.
And I'll wait to see where you are in the world for that. You're in my favorite place right now. My wife's absolute favorite place, Amsterdam. So we are a bit envious of you, but we appreciate your time. And anything, last parting words for the...
Likewise.
Anything for the...
No, not really. If it resonates with people, that's great. You know,
it is.
We all deserve to have an easy life.
It is.
Life's
our
about
best
having
life.
fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I'll be with you back here in 1 second to tell you a proper goodbye, but I want to tell the guys who and women and gals and teens and everyone listening to it, me right here, right now, that thank you very much for your time, your commitment, your comments, your encouragement. We're going to keep this going, see where it goes, bringing great people in like Liam and just showing us better ways to be happy, successful, and to go pro. Thanks.